Welcome to Nuclecast, the official podcast of the ANWA Deterrence Center. Our host is Dr. Adam Lowther, co-founder and vice president for research at the National Institute for Deterrence Studies. The ANWA Deterrence Center is a 501c3 organization ensuring a broader understanding of the nation's strategic nuclear deterrent and its ongoing modernization. Thank you for listening and welcome to the show. The views of the host and the guests are their own.
Welcome back to another great episode of Nuclecast. Of course, I am your host, Adam Lowther, and today we're doing something a bit different on a topic that we have never talked about before. And as you know, I always strive to bring you new topics and new interesting points. So we've really never talked about the CBRN mission. We've never really talked about, there was the mission used to belong to U.S. Strategic Command, and now it's transferred to Special Operations Command. And of course, they're well trained to go around the world and hunt for radiological materials that might get into the wild. And given the strategic challenges we're having with Russia, China, North Korea, potentially Iran, there's a lot going on. And I thought the topic was quite prescient. And so we've asked Ben Hall, Aaron McAdow, and Cathy Riddle from Codeac Solutions to come on the show to talk about a capability that they've developed that makes hunting for these nuclear materials and detecting them a bit easier. And I thought they could talk about what they've invented and then also talk about the mission and how we're out there actively looking to promote this effort at non-proliferation and ensuring that bad guys don't get stuff we don't want them to have. So with that, Ben, Cathy, Aaron, welcome to Nuclecast.
Thank you.
So could you tell us about what is Codeac Solutions, and Cathy, I know you're the inventor and you've got Ben, you're former Australian Army, Aaron, you're former U.S. Army Special Forces, and Cathy, you were an INL scientist that developed the capability. So can you tell us what it is and what it's designed to do? And then Ben, and then Aaron, can you talk about the mission and sort of the broader context in which all of this is happening?
Sure. Codeac colorimetric detection of actinides is a rapid color change, visual color change for actinide elements such as uranium, plutonium, americium, that will give you contact information as soon as you wipe Codeac across a surface. If it turns purple, you've got a hit for uranium. If it turns these different colors, you get a visual hit for uranium. And the really neat thing about Codeac is we all know that someday something's going to happen. It's not going to be an RDD, radioactive dispersal device, in the middle of a cornfield in Iowa. It's going to be downtown Chicago, Manhattan, LA, London, all of these big places across the world. And during the worst moment of people's lives, they can take some solace that Codeac can very, very quickly tell them if there's an issue with them, with their area, and it's going to really help first responders get to the core of where the radioactive material is in under a minute.
So essentially, because I saw Ben was showing me what it looks sort of like a wet wipe, and that you could literally wipe it on a person, on your clothing, on a handrail, and you could tell what that dispersal pattern looked like.
Absolutely. Yeah. First responders can move towards the detonation or the contamination area, and they can survey as they go and get instantaneous response as to what they've just surveyed, as opposed to having to send thousands of grab samples to a laboratory and wait, weeks to months to get results back. It is instantaneous response whether it's a go, no go, they have something or they don't.
So, Aaron, let me come to you now, because you're, prior U.S. Special Forces. This is a mission that Special Forces, is actively working now. It was transferred to them. Can you talk about this, CBRNE mission, the challenges, and what you're out there actively trying to do around the world?
Yeah, absolutely. And just for clarification, I am most familiar with Army Special Forces because I was an Army officer assigned to SOCOM for a number of years, but I did not actually have an extensive CBRN background. So that's been a new world for me. But I've had the opportunity over the last year to work with SOCOM and their CBRN forces to discuss use cases and how this would potentially benefit them. So as the conversations have progressed, we've discovered that this is potentially of great benefit to the EOD teams who go out and identify different types of munitions and whether or not those munitions could be contaminated. And also sensitive site exploitation if they're going someplace where they have intelligence that would indicate that there may have been some radiological activity. They can very quickly use this to screen those sites and identify whether or not they need to focus their CBRN capabilities, the more advanced technical capabilities, on those targets. So that's been the broadest use case for the military, is for identifying places where there is believed to have been radiological activity. But the key that has come out of all of this is the speed to intelligence. So when you're trying to make decisions on the battlefield and you have limited resources, a capability like Codeac allows you to rule out extensive swaths of area where that concern may not be as high, and allows you to focus your more advanced assets on critical targets.
So one of the things we've talked about on previous episodes, we had Gerald Goodfellow, the CEO of the Small Business Consulting Corporation, which helps small businesses develop a path to success in government contracting. Because one of the things we're interested in is in how do small businesses that have new capabilities that can benefit the government, benefit the military, bring that, capability to government. And one of the things that General Goodfellow talked about is that there's this valley of death where you can initially get your first contract, and then to make it sustainable, it becomes, a significant challenge. And so one of the things I'd like, you guys to perhaps share with us is, for you as a new small business that has developed a capability that, from everything we've talked about, sounds like could be really beneficial. How is it trying to make this capability available to government? Do we have the kinds of rules in place that make it easy to work with the government? Is it difficult? Is it a long path? And for a small business, is it something that's sustainable, or does it take a lot of I got to have a lot of capital up front to try to make, to cover this long duration period before I can see success? Ben, perhaps you can talk about that.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. So where to start with that one? So it is the pathway to getting into government is available to small businesses, absolutely, but it also depends on how the technology was originally developed. So for instance, if this was something that is part of an ongoing R&D program that is constant, that is constantly receiving small amounts of funding for the next phase of R&D, that there is a pathway to ramp up and then sort of gain entry to government sales, through programs of record and get onto the GSA and so on and so forth. However, one of the other options available is when technology like this is invented and then licensed by small companies, you do need a substantial amount of capital up front to sort of make your way in this space. But as long as you're methodical and have the right approach, the avenue's there. And so what do I mean by that? Making sure that what you're making is actually what people want. So after we licensed this technology, we went out and we spoke to over 200 stakeholders around the world in the emergency services, policing, military, and healthcare sectors. Over 200 stakeholders around the world from primarily Five Eyes governments, and there was fantastic feedback that came from that. But what that helped us do is to sort of tailor our products even more, and then be able to make them even more specific to our future customer base. And whilst I can actually go on about this forever, I think this might be a good time to cut to Aaron just quickly, because what we were talking about on the RDAX is actually one of those pathways.
Yeah. So when I was first introduced to Ben and joined the team, we talked about the pathway, the acquisition process, and how I specifically said that, with my background in special operations, that I thought that was a good avenue is to take the capability to a more streamlined organization that understands the importance of accelerating getting these capabilities to the right stakeholders. That's why we started with SOCOM, was to go and get their feedback and then to work through that process. So this past week, RDAX Dragon Spear is an unclassified open research and development exercise where SOCOM has developed an incredible opportunity for companies to bring technology out there. There is an application and submission process, but once you get the technology out there, it gives the soldiers the chance to play with things, to kind of stress test things. In some cases, find out the breaking limit of new capabilities. But those opportunities are just phenomenal for both the military and industry to figure out what works and what doesn't, and to identify a pathway forward. So. That's just one step in that procurement process. It's a long pathway, but we've been really fortunate to work with them to start that process, and I think it'll be a much easier transition over to the conventional force once we have identified and worked out any issues.
And then I might just add one more quick point on that we've also established a network of distribution partners around the world in the sort of 14 Eyes nations that allows us access to companies who are already dealing with governments and defense forces. So it's a way of us sort of reaching, the right people and the right revenue earlier on whilst we're still growing.
So as you're working with SOCOM, I'm just curious, because we in the U.S. we've put together this, the AFWorks, StrikeWorks, all of these sort of efforts to try to bring these technologies in more readily, to make money available, to speed the process. Is that part of the process you guys are taking now, or are you sort of following that traditional acquisition process?
Yeah, I can jump on this one. We immediately went to SoftWorks and AFWorks, and definitely saw benefit in pursuing that avenue. Ironically, through that process, we identified that we were much further along in our TRL development of the product. So where they like to help new and emerging technologies to figure out who they are or what they want to become. When we initially made contact with SoftWorks and started through that process, basically identified that we've got something that could potentially benefit the market right now. So we kind of, it's a fantastic process, but for us, we were able to kind of accelerate into the field testing type arena.
Now, it's that time in the show where we have to take a quick break, but when we come back, Cathy, I want to ask you, because this is, I've never had somebody on who was a scientist at one of the national labs, developed a technology, and then left a lab to, I know they're out there, but you're the first one we've had on NucleCast. So when we come back, could you talk about that process? What did you do? How did you make that decision? What made you decide, hey, I want to go out on my own? Because I'm sort of curious for across the labs. We've got more than a dozen labs where scientists are out there building stuff, making new things. And, what made you decide to do it and how did it work? So you're listening to NucleCast. We're talking to the leadership team at Codeac Solutions, and we'll be right back. This episode of NucleCast is brought to you by the ANWA Deterrence Center, whose mission is to educate Americans about the nuclear enterprise and strategic deterrence. And we're back, and we're talking to Ben Hall, Aaron McAdow, and Cathy Riddle from Codeac Solutions, who have developed what seems to be a really interesting technology for detecting radionuclides that are perhaps out in the wild. And there's been a RDD or, who knows what's happened. And so, Cathy, you're former INL, Idaho National Labs. You developed this capability, and then now you're part of a new company. Can you walk me through that process and what made you make the decisions you made?
Actually, I am still with Idaho National Laboratory.
Wow. Okay.
I'm still a senior research scientist there. So this is a wonderful collaboration between industry partner and a national lab. So Codeac Solutions is working under a collaboration document that actually is able to pay me to work at the national lab at INL and use some of the most dangerous materials, radioactive materials on the planet. There are very few places, if any, other than a national lab where you can actually work using the transuranics, the plutoniums, the americiums, neptuniums, all of these radioactive materials that are very difficult to work with. They're very difficult to even get outside of a national lab environment. So this is the perfect collaboration between national lab and industry. And Codeac, from a researcher's standpoint, this is amazing to me every day. We work in such a small little place in our laboratories. As a research scientist, we do research, every day, all the time. We come up with our ideas, we get them funded, we move forward with them. It is an exceptional moment in time when that technology that we've been developing moves out of the laboratory space and into actual market, into actual production. I can speak for many researchers that what we want to see in our careers, in our world, is for our technologies to move forward and make the world a better place, to help people, like I said earlier, in the worst moments of their life. To be able to do that is just astounding to me still to this moment. It is just an amazing accomplishment. And to be able to collaboratively work between INL and Codeac Solutions is the best of both worlds.
So is this relationship that you described, because I don't think I was really familiar with it, that the labs were partnering with small businesses to push their, the technologies? Because I can imagine from, I've spent a lot of time at Livermore and some at Los Alamos and Sandia. And so, weapons development labs. But I just wonder, is this a common thing across, whether it's Lincoln or whether it's Argonne or you pick the lab, where you have scientists working on things and then they develop something and then they sort of have a aha. And I think this has some commercial, utility. And then the labs, because normally, government, I know the labs are GoCos, so they're not really government, but they're, quasi-government, and you don't really think of them as being sort of the creators of commercial capability. And so is this a common thing across labs, or is INL unique? Maybe you're unique, or is it just more common than I think it is?
I can only speak for INL, but it is common. It's called a strategic program, partnership program, and this is one of the reasons the lab is here. It's not just science for the sake of science, engineering for the sake of engineering. We are here to help the U.S., to help the citizens who fund, as you said, through a cooperation between the government and a private contractor. We are here to help make the lives of people better, whether it's through nuclear energy, whether it's through Codeac. This is our job. And as a scientist, I embrace that. We are being paid to come up with the solutions that help people, to help their lives. And Codeac does that.
So walk me through this process, and maybe Ben, you can jump in here. So Cathy, you're at the lab, you're working in your lab, and you develop this capability. And you say, this is great. I think people could benefit from it. We want to get it out to a wider audience. So Ben, where do you come in? How does a business get created that takes Cathy's invention and then turn it into something that's, that SOCOM has, perhaps other militaries, the Five Eyes? What's that process? Because I'm completely unfamiliar with it.
So that's a great question. So where do we start? So once the technology's been identified at a national lab, for instance, and we on an initial assessment, we'll have a look at it and go, right, what is the utility to society? Where who's going to use this? What's the return on investment going to be? How big is the potential market for this? We do a brief assessment of that to start with, and then we decide to license or acquire that technology depending on the terms of the lab. So from there, someone like me is hired, and we start to build out a company. And from there, we start to build out the business case around this. So for instance, in the case of Codeac, we looked at it and we went, right, this is a whole of force complementary capability. And what do I mean by that? This is very complementary to existing technology. It will do things like more efficient use of current nuclear search teams. So if you picture 100,000 soldiers in a deployed environment being asked to reach into your pocket, get a wet wipe, and wipe the nearest door handle. And whatever turns purple, that's where your specialists go. That's a very powerful tool. So these are the sorts of questions we started to ask ourselves around building this business out. And then we did it, what we discussed before, went and spoke to a couple of hundred stakeholders around the world and said, what is your interest in this? So from there, then it's all about the people. So, when you look around this call now, so you have Dr. Riddle, who we work with under a strategic partnership program. One of the other inventor of Codeac, Dr. Rick Demmer. So we work with him on a daily basis as a private citizen. And then Aaron, with his background in US Special Forces and being able to deeply understand what those government needs are and what the operational needs are, particularly in a deployed environment. And then, we have our head of operations is a former lawyer and accountant, and, a former KPMG strategy consultant. Our marketing director used to work for Ralph Lauren and so on. And sort of where I go with that is it's about the commercial assessment to start with, and then building the right team of people to make sure that we can get the tech into the hands of the people that need it the most.
And so how hard, how hard is that to do, I've spent most of my life, my adult life and career has been working for the military. And so I wonder if you're a young corporation with a new capability, is that really hard? Or is it And is it getting harder, getting easier? What is that like?
So you probably won't like my answer here. I love coming to work every single day. It is challenging, but I never once wake up and go, "This is too hard to do." We genuinely have novel technology. There is nothing else like this in the world. So, all jokes aside, implementing any change is difficult, and that includes bringing new technology to life, new products into the market, because we are making the market as we go. We have to educate people about the product and why it's complementary, how it increases their ability to detect threats at borders, and then the aha moment that we get from people, and when we know that whilst it's been hard to get there, we do get an aha moment from people, such as we were talking to a US military officer who was thinking about future deployments near borders and said, "So you're telling me if I was to line up 100 people wanting to cross a border and ask them to rub their hands on a white cloth, I could just simply walk down that line and apply some of this liquid to each one of them and find out who's been handling nuclear materials?" I said, "Yes, absolutely." And that was the moment at which they go, "Right, I now understand what this is about." But it probably took a couple of weeks to get there. And then somebody in the British forces who went, "So you're telling me I could rub down captured soldiers' weapon or boots?" And like, "Yes, absolutely." So the hard part is getting to the aha moment. Once you're there, it's a lot easier.
Yeah. And so, Cathy, I was thinking about it while Ben was talking. I was just curious, what is your positive detection rate? Because that's one of the challenges with detecting nuclear materials is that detection rate, and just how many, how much nuclear material do you need so that you can detect it? So what is that for Codeac?
It's very low detection rates. We'll get a color change for using this as an example for uranium at 1 part per million. So we're above background, which is good because we, even here in Idaho and our surrounding states, there's a lot of uranium mining. So you want above background, or you'd be finding it everywhere. So we are highly above background, 1 part per million. You'll get that color change. My summer intern, my undergraduate interns and I did a lot of work over the summer to find the exact, how long it takes. And it is near instantaneous, the color change. It is pretty amazing to watch. All of a sudden, you've got a piece of white fabric that turns a brilliant shade of purple in the presence of uranium. And it's everyone we've shown it to they're just like, "How does that work?" And so, well, we can't tell you how that works, but it works. It works really well, and it's just amazing to see.
So it's that time in the show where I like to bring out Bob. And Bob is my magic genie. And if I rub the lamp, Bob pops out. Bob grants guest on NucleCast 3 wishes, but only wishes related to the topics we've been discussing. So as Bob grants your 3 wishes, I will let you guys decide who makes the first wish. So Ben, do you want to go first?
So my first wish would be that the next steps that we were talking about in terms of a small business sort of successfully entering the US government sales market, that our next steps are not as long as others have been.
Okay. I get that one. I can understand that. That makes sense. As a government guy, I understand. How about Cathy? You want to go second? So wish number 2.
That there isn't this immediate need to have to use Codeac because, again, worst day of someone's life. But when it does happen, we are there, and we are there to save lives.
Yeah. Well said. Aaron?
Yeah, third in the chute. That's hard to follow. I think getting this capability into the right hands. So we've just had phenomenal response from first responders, from emergency management. We've talked with FEMA, Homeland Security, TSA, Coast Guard, DoD. We think that the capability is just an incredible enhancement to current capabilities. So the just kind of that wildfire moment where it catches on and spreads and gets into all the right hands. We don't want to be late to the fight. We're trying to get this to the right people before they need it. So that would be my caveat wish to the two that have already been presented.
All right. Well, Ben Hall, Cathy Riddle, Aaron McAdow from Codeac Solutions, thanks for joining us on this episode of NucleCast.
Thank
you very much for having us.
And I enjoyed it. And thanks to you, the listeners, and we'll see you on the next episode. Well, we don't normally talk to companies that have developed products, but given that it was in sort of the nuclear space, I'm always interested in how do we do what we do better? Because if we're facing the Russians, the Chinese, the North Koreans, the Iranians, and we have to technology has always been one of the things that the U.S. military has relied on as its comparative advantage. So I'm always interested in how do we get new technologies into the military? How do we make that work? How do we streamline it? How do we make it faster? And so for me, it was interesting, especially to talk to Cathy about how INL is working. They've developed a technology. Now they want to commercialize that technology. And so sort of talking with them about doing that, I thought was really interesting. And so hopefully you sort of saw similar things to me and you found it interesting as well.
This has been a production of the NY Deterrence Center, a 501c3 that seeks to educate key decision makers, stakeholders, and the public to ensure a broader understanding of the nation's strategic nuclear deterrent. Our executive producer is Kimberly Charrington, and this episode has been engineered and mixed by David Crumpaw. Help us grow our followers by sharing it and follow the show on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter at NucleCast.